You've seen us build video or intersections in some past videos where we use line between points, and we'll do something like this. We'll start point and then we'll do a perpendicular snap. And then when we edit it, then everything remains perpendicular. But I had a question recently that said I want to be perpendicular at a specific station. Well, to do that, you need Civil Accudraw. Now, I've activated the Civil Accudraw toolbar. You can do that from the task navigation here. And I've activated the station offset method. I'm going to use the same line between points command. Except you'll notice now I've got a station offset prompt. I'm going to pick the basis of stationing, pick my alignment. First click the O shortcut on the keyboard. And now you see I'm tracking station offset from that element. Now, some people have a hard time remembering these shortcuts, and there are quite a few. And so if that's a problem for you, then an easy way to get at everything for Accudraw is with focus in one of the Accudraw fields. I just press the space bar. Now I can get to pretty much everything about the Accudraw, including the shortcuts, and this one, set origin. And again, the same thing, you just pick. So now I've got Civil Accudraw working, basis of stationing is set. So now if I want a specific station, then I'll just type 5 plus 0, enter to lock. Lock and offset. You do have to lock both ordinates if you want to persist a rule. And so now you'll see that I'm locked there. So I'll set the first point. And then for the second point, again, I'll use the perpendicular snap. Now when I select that element, then you can see my rule from Civil Accudraw is persisted. I have the offset, of course, but the station is actually the one that's important to me. And so if I need to change that station, then I'll say 5 plus 50, for example. Then you see it moves the endpoint and remains, or keeps the perpendicular nature of the other side. Now, what else can Civil Accudraw do? You'll find some places in the tool set that when you want to build a certain constraint, that really Civil Accudraw is your best answer. And let me show some simple examples. So I'll use the same line between points command again. I want to change the method for Civil Accudraw to distance and direction, one of the most familiar things and perhaps the most often thing that we do. Now, you'll notice I've got some kind of distance and direction there. To make sure that my origin is set properly, I can click the O shortcut again. It's the same shortcut whether you're setting a point origin or the origin for the basis of stationing. And again, I can use the space bar to bring up the quick toolbox. Now I'll set the origin point, which sets the compass. Now I'm tracking distance and direction. Now I'll point out a couple of things here. Notice when I get right there how that the distance kind of gets a little brighter. That's actually recalling whatever I used last. Just a few minutes ago, as I was preparing for this, I'd used a distance of 400 feet. And so on the chance that you may be using the same number again, then we just give you a way to bounce right back to that. The same thing would happen in lots of different places for Civil Accudraw. We recall those last numbers. So now let me then lock the distance. So now you see my distance is locked. And I can lock the direction, and I'll do north 35 east, just for a number. Now on the other end, I don't want to use a distance direction because, I mean, you could. You notice that the compass moved to the beginning point, as would be expected. I could set a different origin down here so that I could locate that endpoint from somewhere else. But I can actually mix them up, and so I'll go back to station and offset. You remember, notice it remembers that I've used this alignment last, and so I can place this endpoint with a different constraint with a station and offset. Now, what I've got then is a line between 2 points, but the endpoints are fixed by Accudraw constraints. So there's the distance I put in earlier. I can change that if I need to, if something changes that I need to adjust that point. The direction also. And here I have station and offset, so if something happens I can change that. Now let's look at maybe a couple of the less common things. Here's one that will be familiar use for surveyors. This is a need that surveyors have all the time, is a distance direction. Or a distance direction is there. That's also commonly used by surveyors when you're computing properties. So let's take a look at how it works. Again, I'll use our line between points command. You notice I'm at distance, and so I'll just start the point there, or start the line there. Now in this case, you'll notice I've got two constraints in Accudraw, both of them distance, and I need to have two different origins. And so focus in the first one, I'll click the O button, and I can set that origin here. I'll set the focus in the other distance field, and again, the O shortcut or the space bar to get to set origin, and I'll set the other compass there. So now you see I'm locating the point based upon two distances. So I'll do 475 there. And again, you have to lock both numbers in Civil Accudraw if you want to persist the rule. Let me show you the difference of what I'm talking about there. So you notice I locked 475 and I locked 350, and so that placed the rule on that endpoint. Now let me show you another example. I'll use the same distance. So I'll come from over here. You see I've got two origin points. It does its best to guess where the origin points might be. So I'll just lock one. And so you see I've got 400. And that can be useful, but the difference is if I only lock one, it does not persist a rule, simply because the math requires that we have both of them locked in order to know what the rule is. And so you can make use of it with only one of the values locked, but it won't persist the rule. If you want to persist the rule, then you need to lock both. Let's undo that a few times, and we'll take a look at just a few other things about Civil Accudraw. All of these methods are user customizable, and so if I go to the settings, you'll find in the favorites, this is where you can configure all the different methods that you use most frequently. We provide some out of the box that are most commonly used. You can delete those if you wish. If you don't use them, don't need them, you can delete them. Most importantly, you can add new stuff, and so offset for example is one that's sometimes used. And so I just added, give it a name, and choose the two ordinates. And so you'll see now I've got a new method in my dialog box. Two new ones, let's call this delta offset. If you've used Select Series 3 in previous versions, there's two new methods in Select Series 3. Those are delta station and delta offset. Those work just a little bit differently when you're setting the origin, because it actually has to set the basis of stationing and then also an origin point for the delta. And so let me turn that delta station, delta offset, set that to the method. Again, I'll use line between points. And so for delta station, notice how I do this. I'm going to, again, click, I'll do it this way. So I want to go to set origin, which is correct, but it takes two picks. First of all, I pick the alignment that sets the basis of stationing, but then I need to pick once more, and I'll snap to this point so that it knows the delta. And so you see the stationing is running along this alignment. So you see the offset line, how it's curved there. But the delta, notice there the number 105. That 105 is measured from this point right here. So the delta station measures from that point, and then the stationing along here. Same way with the offset. One pick to pick the alignment, and then another pick for the delta offset. So now you see, if I get kind of close there, you see delta station's 26 because it's measured from that point, delta offset, and so from there, so there you see 26, up here minus 24. So a little bit different there in the way that one works. The rest of the settings, the operation settings, these will be in function on this panel, almost identical to the settings for MicroStation Accudraw. These are the display colors. The defaults you see here, you can change these colors. Colors of the compass, colors of the constraint dynamics. Those are customizable. And then here's some rounding settings. These two, distance and angle, are identical in function to what MicroStation does. Basically, it just gives a step value. And so if I put this in as 5 for the distance, then your distances would round off 5, 10, 15, 20. Similarly with angles. These two don't exist in MicroStation Accudraw because they don't know station and offset, but it works the same way. It's just a rounding value for station and offset. And then these functions here are the same as MicroStation. And we looked at the favorites a moment ago. Now, one thing that some people like, and I'll show you this. It's actually in the settings here. You can toggle it with a shortcut key, but we added it here in the settings because some people prefer this method, is show the Accudraw dialog. Now, what's the difference? What I get then with that turned on is I get this fixed dialog, and I'll show distance direction because it's the most common. Start my line between points. You'll notice on my cursor the inputs for Civil Accudraw are no longer shown there because they're shown here instead. I want to turn that back off because I do like the floating dialog. And so that's Civil Accudraw. I encourage you to investigate it, learn to use it, and you'll find that it will solve a lot of problems in your geometry that you really can't solve any other way.